Well, you probably have heard everything that needs to be heard about what's going on, really. And then the question a number of people are asking is, why now? What is going on with the fight against corruption, which is one of the three main cardinal platforms upon which the federal government is running the nation? But then one of the issues is how this whole accusations and the rest of them came to be. But then the first thing then would be, how open is the EFCC to taking issues from people? The EFCC, well, the removed EFCC chairman somewhere earlier this month had said, look, if you know anything about us, what can help us to improve on our activities, maybe you should listen to him yourself. All right, well, I'll bring you that one shortly. But then to discuss these issues, of course, the presidency has been making statements about it. The counsel to Magu himself have also been speaking to discuss this and several other issues. Let me begin with Omodara Samson, who is former publicity secretary of the NBA in Ikeja. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
For having me.
First of all, what do you make of all of these going on about the anti-corruption fight?
Well, I think one important thing that every government has failed to look into is building an institution, not building an institution around the particular person. That has always been the problem we have, particularly with the EFCC. I remember the first chairman of the commission was also treated this way. There was this hype about his personality, followed by Madam Wasiri before we have this Magu. But I think the important thing is for institutions to be built not around a particular individuals.
But you know, this thing that you just raised now, it calls for concern. Every chairman of the EFCC since the beginning has had to leave rather unceremoniously.
In a very controversial manner.
Yeah. Is that a problem of, is this something that should worry us, or you think we have not just found the right person? But before we go to that one, how do we build an institution without an individual?
That has always been our problem generally in this country. Not only in EFCC, other government agencies, parastatals. We need to look at how we have, if for example, in the advanced crimes, we have the FBI. No name has been mentioned. What we hear is FBI. What we should be hearing should be EFCC, not
Yes.
Malam Magu.
But then even the FBI that you cited,
Yes.
some would say, well, at the beginning, it wasn't like that, because once you mention FBI, the name J. Edgar Hoover comes to mind, first of all. So very, very strong individual that built that institution.
Very well.
Shouldn't we have such a thing as well, where one individual is able to build an institution strong enough to be able to sustain itself?
We should be able to have such situations. And if you look at it since 2003 when EFCC came into being, that's about 16 or 17 years ago. By now, we should be able to have an institution, not built around a particular individual.
What do you think is the problem? What do you think is the problem with that?
I think we need to look inward at the presidency. We look inward at the act that created the EFCC.
What's the problem with the act?
No, we need to look at how who heads the agency is appointed. We need to look at that. Then we need to look at other heads, sectional heads of the commission, so that what we need to do is to build an institution, not around a particular person, so that if Magu leaves today, we won't have problem with the EFCC.
How do we build an institution? I ask that because Ibrahim Magu is a founding operational person at the EFCC. And he has been at such headship level, so to speak, the leadership at the lower levels of the EFCC from the very beginning of the EFCC. One would say that they didn't need to bring anybody else from outside the EFCC. That would suggest to some people that that's some measure of strength of the institution, wouldn't you say? Because if they had brought someone from outside of the institution, it would mean that, okay, maybe they're just trying to roughshod over the institution itself and use whoever is appointed to run some errands.
I do not think so. I think having brought Magu in, being part of the officers that initially started the EFCC, was a plus to EFCC. And I think we should have other functional officials within the EFCC who should automatically take over from EFCC seamlessly without making this noise. Once a question has been raised about his integrity, and I look at it, even when he was sent, his name was sent to National Assembly for confirmation, issues were raised by the Senate. But the presidency, within his knowledge, waived those issues, and he was retained as in acting capacity. The president knew why that decision was taken.
Do you think that decision was right or was wrong? Now,
to my mind, my personal opinion, it was wrong, because by our constitutional democracy, all government agencies and appointees must pass through National Assembly for screening, and particularly the DSS should be able to screen whoever has been sent to National Assembly for confirmation. And the report of DSS then, according to National Assembly, the reports were damning on Magu. But the presidency, in its wisdom, went ahead and retained him in acting capacity. And now that the same presidency has now found out that he should be suspended because of the weightiness of the allegation against him, then so be it.
When you say that the decision to retain him in acting capacity was wrong, was it illegal?
It wasn't. It wasn't. The federal government has the power to hire and fire. And if I intend to employ somebody in my company, and I find out that maybe my wife does not like the face of the man, and I find out that the man can work for me, it's my personal decision. I should be able to go ahead and take such decisions in my personal capacity. And that was exactly what the presidency did.
All right. Well, we have also joining us in this conversation, Monday Ubani, who is a former second vice president of the NBA. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Ubani. Mr. Sampson here has said that, it would seem like the presidency, in the process of trying to confirm Mr. Magu as the EFCC chairman at the time, had varying positions on whether or not the man qualified. The report of the DSS, which of course Mr. Magu himself explained, and the presidency, both of them seem to be at variance before the National Assembly at the time. Do you think that was a problem in itself, or it was just something that served certain interests?
Well, Ayo, thank you for having me. Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians. The position of the law remains that position is that Section 2, Subsection 3 of the EFCC Act makes a provision that whoever wants to be the chairman of that particular agency needs the confirmation of the Senate. And so I think 2 or 3 times the president presented Magu for confirmation. And those times, the Senate rejected the confirmation, saying that he failed the integrity test. I listened to my learned brother, my friend, Molara, the former PRO of MBA Ikeja branch, saying that the president did not do anything wrong by keeping him in an acting capacity for 5 years. And that is not the correct position with due respect. If the Senate is given that authority and power to confirm, and then you are unable to have him confirmed by the Senate, the next thing you have to do is to replace that individual with another person, because the act itself that created EFCC made it very mandatory that he must get the confirmation of the Senate before he can become the chairman of the EFCC. There was no room for acting capacity. The acting capacity of the EFCC chairperson could only be possible before you send his name or her name of that individual to Senate for confirmation. Now, when that particular confirmation failed and failed woefully, there was no reason for that individual to be retained, and he has been there for 5 solid years. And that, again, calls to question some of the actions or all the actions he has taken within the time he has been.
Mr. Ubani, just one moment, Mr. Ubani. Are you saying that from what you're saying, it would seem like the president acted in error by retaining Mr. Magu in acting capacity? Is there something specifically that says you know, the man cannot be in acting capacity for as long as, you know, the president wants, or that is a lacuna in the law that needs to be looked at?
It is both. If you look at the act that created the office of the chairmanship of EFCC, there is no room for acting capacity, even though people want to have a recourse to Interpretation Act that if you have power to appoint, you also have power to put somebody in an acting capacity. Now, the acting capacity thing is, if somebody has been there before the expiration of that substantive position, you as a president who is up to, knowing fully well what you need to do, need to send somebody's name to the Senate for confirmation if you have somebody you want to use to replace that individual, or ask that person to be there in the acting capacity, pending the time the Senate will confirm or reject that individual's confirmation. In fact, in America, what they do is that if somebody is in an acting capacity and they want to send the name of that individual in an acting capacity, to the Senate for confirmation, they will remove that individual and bring somebody else, in an acting capacity, pending the time the Senate will confirm or reject. The moment the Senate rejects or confirms, the person now goes to act and in a substantive position if it's confirmed. But if it's rejected, then the person loses that position. But here, what happened in Magu's case is that you sent him for confirmation and the Senate rejected his name, and you now kept him in an acting capacity for 5 solid years. Even if somebody has to act in an acting capacity, not up to 5 solid years or even 2 years or even up to a year, because there must be confirmation as required by law. The moment you are keeping that individual in an act for over 5 years, or for 5 years or 4 years, is clearly wrong. It's a great error that was committed with regards to Magu's matter.
Okay, so do you agree with him? He says, it is. You said it's not against the law. He says it is.
Well, like you said, it's subject to argument. It's subject to interpretation of. If we refer, like you mentioned, if we have to look at interpretation of the actions taken by the presidency, the president that has power to hire also has the power to fire. And like I said, the president knew why that decision was taken. In his wisdom, there must be a particular reason why the president acted that way.
Well, while the reason might be substantive, yes, this is a matter of law now.
Yes.
He has said...
He has conferred a valid position.
Mr. Ubani has said that the president or presidency acted against the law. Do you agree with him?
I do agree with him. But the presidency knew why that decision was taken.
But the vice president, I remember, himself, a senior advocate of Nigeria, a lawyer, said that there was nothing in the law that mandates that the EFCC chairman cannot, that says that the EFCC chairman cannot be in office in acting capacity.
If you look at argument put forward by my Nane friend, my Nane senior, Mandi Ubani, it will be proper that the moment somebody else's name is sent to the National Assembly and that name is rejected, normally another person should be sent, another name should be sent to the National Assembly. But I wouldn't know why the presidency went ahead to retain Magu in acting capacity for this number of years before this present situation we find ourselves now.
Let me go back to something that you began to talk about the other time, the fact that every chairman of the EFCC has had to leave office on ceremonious manner. Yeah. Is that something that should worry us, or we've simply not found the right person?
We should be worried. We should be worried. And that's why we have to look inward as a nation. We have to look inward as a nation.
Why should we be worried?
We should be worried. Why will every chairman of EFCC will leave that office controversially? The same thing happened to the first chairman. Madam Waziri also left not in a very good manner. Look at what's happening to Magu now. We should look at situations in it, and let's not deceive ourselves. These gentlemen that's one way or the other has been the head of this anti-corruption agency might be doing their work. Because for presidency to have retained Magu for 5 years, there must be a particular reason. And I believe, subject to any other thing, that reason will be altruistic for the general interest of the country. But some forces too will also fight back to ensure that whoever heads that agency will be disgraced out of office.
Don't you think some
That's
of the...
corruption fighting back.
Good. Well, don't you think some of the allegations against him have some value? Because, for instance, 2 of them, let me just mention, the panel, the presidential panel, says that this man is unable to account for 332 seized houses, all over the place, and the fact that 39 million or 39 billion naira there was a gap between what was declared and what was deposited in the coffers. Isn't that some discrepancy that should give us concern?
That's a very grave allegation against Magu, and the panel should look into it. If it's found culpable, because nobody is above the law. If it's found culpable, the appropriate sanction should be meted.
Okay. Mr. Obani, what's your take on that? Every chairman of the EFCC, from Nuhu Ribadu to Waziri to Lamode, and now Ibrahim Magu, they have had to leave office unceremoniously. Is it something that should give us concern?
Yes. Yeah, we should be very concerned about it, and I think the problem is fundamental and systemic, and we need to deal with the issue of EFCC in a holistic manner. I think this particular incident of Magu has given Federal Republic of Nigeria an opportunity to look at the fight against corruption and the agency itself and do a total review. And one of the reviews that some of us are suggesting with the EFCC Act is that the person that should be appointed there should not necessarily be a police officer. There are other security agencies, with intelligent men and women that should be appointed, or even beyond issue of looking at the security agency. There are so many intelligent men and women in this country outside the security force that can be appointed as chairman of EFCC. It doesn't require that you must have a security background, but the point is that you must be well educated, learned, brushed up well, thoroughly, to handle the issue of corruption. After all, the one that is heading the one of Kenya is not a security, is a professor. And the man is doing so well with the fight against corruption in Kenya. So we need to look at the issue of appointment, the recruitment process, that it doesn't have to be only security agent that should be recruited as a chairperson. Then the second issue is the issue of recovery of property or stolen items. It should not be managed by that agency, because most of the people that have actually run that agency ended up having problems with management of the recovered loot. And so why must you now leave such an agency to be the one to manage the loot they recover? Look at the issue of discrepancies in terms of properties allegedly recovered, or the money, or the cash. I mean, why every day Magu was always, reading out all the figures of amount of money has recovered in the billions. And now when they now check the books shows a lot of discrepancy between what he was announcing to the members of the public and what was actually with the Ministry of Finance or Central Bank. So it means that there has always been a problem with the issue of management of the recovered loot. It should not be the same agency. We should now create a different agency that should also manage it. Can you imagine that I heard that EFCC's account has not been audited for the last five years? There is no general audit of the account of EFCC. Who does that? So how can you have an agency that is not properly audited? And of course, the agency itself is under Ministry of Justice, and the man that is there does not account to any person, does not account to the ministry, that's supervisory ministry, and for 5 solid years. So these are issues we need to deal with. So we have to tinker with the EFCC Act. We have to tinker with administrative powers of the EFCC chairperson. We also have to tinker with the independence of that body, that it mustn't be appointed, the chairman must be appointed by the president. Another arm of government should do the appointment and ensure the independence of that body. But the body must also be monitored by other arms of government to avoid abuse, which actually the present agency fell into. There was a clear case of violation of people's rights, abuse and mismanagement of the alleged resources now that is an issue before the parliament.
Well, you said just now that the EFCC needs to be a little more open. Perhaps that is why the EFCC chairman earlier this month also made this comment.
We are at the level of a moving train. Yes. A moving train. We don't have apology to any looter. We just hit them. I'm telling you, we hit them. And I want you to monitor what we are doing. Yes. So that it's not a one-way situation. You have the right to check the excesses that you record here. Yes. Find a way to tell me that something is going wrong. I will take correction. If you don't do that, you are not. You are already part of the fight against corruption. So you have a duty, responsibility to look at the right thing we are doing and also the wrong thing we are doing. If we are doing wrong, tell us. Because if you don't tell us, you are also responsible. Yes. Yes. You are now part and parcel of the fight against corruption. Please.
Well, Mr. Sampson, what do you make of that? Do you think he was just paying lip service or he actually meant it?
Well, I'm not a clairvoyant. I may not know his state of mind where he made that statement. But I will want to give him the benefit of the doubt that he meant well when he said his agents should be looked into. If some wrongs were committed, they should be corrected, and they should also be applauded when good things were done.
Well, I'll take your opinion on what Mr. Ubani said about the law, about tinkering with the law. But let me take your position, Mr. Ubani, on what you just heard of the chairman of the EFCC calling the public to check the EFCC.
It's a good one. It's a good call. Believing that he was matching words, with action, because I have had dealings with EFCC. And what he was just saying openly is not actually what you see in EFCC. They give you the impression that Magu does not take instruction, even from his boss. They give you the impression that Magu does not obey court order. I mean, that is clear. I had a particular case in which he was sued. They refused service of the court process. Even when judgment was given asking Mr. Magu to take an action, either to release or to charge. Magu refused to obey that court order. And when that order was served on the lawyers that work with Magu, and they told us that Magu does not in any way obey court order, that we should forget about court order, that the only thing we can do is that we should call certain persons to actually advise him that he does not obey court order. But he is saying openly now that people should be able to checkmate him and probably, correct him. I mean, that is different from the posture that I know that is painted about Magu while he will hear sway as EFCC chairperson. He does not listen. He does not obey court order. He does not in any way, believe that somebody is innocent or proven guilty. The moment you are arrested for corrupt practices, you already assume to be guilty in the eyes of Magu. And then all the manner of characters that are being displayed against you as an individual, not being given a fair hearing, and then the next thing that they're now telling the whole world, through press of allegations that are alleged against you, damaging your name at the end of the day without giving the opportunity of being here in the court of law. So I think that posture he put was a very good one if he matches action with words that we should also look at what EFCC is doing. I was in EFCC cell, and I discovered that some people were in EFCC cell for up to 2, 3, 4 months without bail, without having access to their lawyer. And I was wondering, what is the issue? Why would it be in that particular place for such number of months without trial? And then I also saw a situation where they were bringing in people every day into the cell. And I was wondering, who is supervisory ministry of this particular agency? Are they coming to see in the cell the number of persons that are supposed to be there and the number of persons that are kept there? And every day we keep on having people, and the place is so hot, so uncomfortable, but they don't mind. A situation where we had up to 50 at a go in the cell, 40-something at a go. That was not too good for an agency of that and all that. So I'm saying, if Magu now says that EFCC should be investigated, I mean, we should also correct them and all that. That is a very good thing. Let us begin to look into the Nigerian police. Let us begin to look into DSS. Let's begin to look at it. All agencies were in democracy. These agencies must operate within the law. They cannot be above the law. You cannot operate democracy and allow agencies to begin to put people in jail for a number of days without trial and all that, without having access to their lawyers and relations. That cannot be allowed to happen. I'm very happy that he made that statement. Let the new person that have taken over now, let EFCC be under the eyes, under the watch of Nigeria, so that we begin to complain of some of these excesses in order not to allow them to do whatever they can do and get away with. That cannot be a country all of us should be proud of.
Well, perhaps that's also pointing to one other allegation that's been making the rounds, which is the activities of the EFCC. I'm talking about EFCC as an institution now, not just, of the chairman, because as Mr. Sampson said earlier, if we continue to focus on an individual, we are not strengthening that institution. But there are other issues on this same Magu saga. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. We're still exploring the issues around the chairman of the EFCC that's been removed and already replaced, and that's talking about Mr. Ibrahim Magu. Well, Mr. Omodara Sampson is still here. Mr. Magu was quoted recently as saying through his counsel that he's not been allowed to defend himself, that he's not allowed to participate in proceedings involving other witnesses. Do you think he's within his rights, or he's overreaching, since this is not a trial, it's just an inquiry? Whether
a judicial or quasi-judicial inquiry or panel, every suspect, because as far as I'm concerned, these are allegations that need to be proved before probably is convicted or is sanctioned, is entitled to have his lawyers, to have his input by way of participation, representation at all stages of the proceeding. It is an entitlement, constitutional entitlement. It is right. It is right.
But it's an inquiry. It's not a trial.
Whether it is an inquiry, he has the right to be heard, to be given what I would call fair hearing. And fair hearing entails that when an issue is raised, he has a stake, or he is allowed to say something about it. What do you know about this? He responds to such allegations.
But
he must also, such proceedings must also be done in his presence or his representative.
But you know that the presidency has since said that he is being allowed to have a fair hearing. You know, maybe the problem now is who is saying what is correct, because the act that set up, that empowered the president to set up this panel says that they reserve the rights to make it whether public or private. So is that the problem here?
Even if it's in camera, that is in private, he is also entitled. If Nigerians are not allowed to see, that is what is meant by private or in camera. But he, as the suspect or the person accused, has that fundamental right to participate either personally or through a counsel of his choice.
Okay.
That is his right.
Mr. Obani, what's your take?
My learned friend is very correct. Whether administrative panel or judicial proceeding, the defendant or the accused person has the right to not only have a legal representation, but to have that lawyer cross-examine any witness or witness they are bringing to put up any allegation against him. So he deserves all the legal safeguards, including, as I said earlier, cross-examining that individual who is giving evidence against you. And so they must ensure that he enjoys fair hearing. It's a constitutional right, and that right cannot be taken away by any panel or by any judicial process. So it's important that he has his day. But it's also to be noted that we're only hearing from him. The people from the panel, I don't know whether they have the spokesperson also to either debunk or corroborate what he has been saying concerning the denial. The government instead has been very deficient in giving us information about what is happening to Magu, except what Shehu Garuba put up last weekend concerning the travel of Magu. We were kept totally in dark of what is actually going on, whether he has been suspended or whether somebody else has replaced and all that. You know, what we are getting is from the social media, which is not clearly correct. We should be interested in what comes from the government side concerning this particular process. It's somebody that is their chief anti-corruption agent that is actually being tried. And so members of the public will be interested in knowing what is actually going on. Some of the information we're having on social media, most of them, 90%, may not be accurate. So it's important government comes up to explain that this man is giving fair hearing, and that fair hearing is something that is entitled to under our constitution. Very, very important and very key.
Okay, the instrument that set up this panel, this Salami panel, is the Tribunals of Inquiry Act of 1966, and it has quite a number of things, including the fact that the terms of reference ought to be spelled out. And that's one of the issues that Mr. Magu has raised through his counsel, that he doesn't even know what the terms of reference are. And some of the issues raised against him, some of the petitions against him, he doesn't have access to them. Is that a problem?
It's a problem. As the lawyer rightly pointed out, if somebody is accused of any crime, what the law allows is that that person must be given an opportunity or to know what the crime is all about. It's important, so that in order to prepare for his defense. If you're accusing me, you're bringing me before any panel and you don't know what my offenses are or whatever I'm alleged to have committed, how do I even prepare in order to give public clarification and answer to whatever allegations you have leveled against me? So it's important that we do it and do it properly. If you want to, investigate somebody who is in charge of the anti-corruption fight for almost 5 years, and you have been set up to do all that, I think that the proper thing is let him know the allegations and not what he reads from the paper. That these are the allegations against you. Unless they're saying that every day new allegations are coming in and all that. But even at that, let him be given that opportunity of responding to those allegations they have made against him, because he has a right of fair hearing. You don't just probably, play, the kind of role some of the security agencies play in this country, where they arrest you and they don't give you an opportunity. When you want to talk, they even, shut you down. And then the next thing is that they start using unorthodox method in order to extract what they call confessional statement, which is different from what we see in other civilized crime, when before they come for you, they have done their investigation, done and dusted, before they now begin to present to you all those concrete facts that shows linkages of you with the ingredients of the offense. So it's very difficult for you. Like Hush Puppy now that is being tried, in America. Before they came for him, they have done all their work. So whatever the intelligent lawyer is going to do in America is maybe to get him on plea bargain, but not that it's going to exonerate him completely, because their job has been well done. But here, the security agencies will arrest you and then begin to look for evidence. And I don't think that that should be the particular thing that should be done with regards to Magu. I'm sure they would have gotten their information and do it right and give him an opportunity also to respond to those grave allegations that have been leveled against him.
Well, just one last word from you. There are issues, part of the issues that were raised last week is that the fundamental rights of Mr. Magu might be in the breach right now. Do you think that is something that should give concern, or it's still something we can manage?
Like my colleague said, it is very fundamental that he is allowed to have free and unfettered access to his lawyers.
Okay.
Allegations that have been leveled against him, he should also have access to read those petitions and respond appropriately to those petitions, and it is ensured that his lawyers are allowed to defend him within his constitutional right.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Omadara Samson is former Publicity Secretary of the NBA Ikeja branch, as well as Monday Ubani, former second Vice President of the NBA. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We're back in a moment to take on another issue. Please stay with us.
The 2020 amendment budget, which I have just signed into law today, underscores our administration's firm commitment to effectively contain the spread of COVID-19 and protect the lives and livelihood of our people. With these budget amendments, as well as our recently launched 2.3 trillion naira stimulus program, we are well positioned to safeguard the economy. Considering recent budget implementation challenges, I have directed that efforts be made to assure effective implementation of the Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 in order to realize its laudable objectives. The Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning is in the process of effecting budgetary releases that will ensure that all ministries, departments, and agencies receive at least 50% of their amended capital budget by the end of this month. The Appropriation Repeal and Amendment Act 2020 that I have just signed into law provides for aggregate expenditures of 10.81 trillion naira, which is an increase of 216 billion naira over the level of expenditure initially proposed in 2020 Appropriation Act.
Jobs, employment problems or unemployment problems, rising unemployment figures, threatening poverty, state challenged economy, need for across all levels, and the other issues on the front burner. And then we have COVID-19, which has made it a lot worse. And then we have a revised budget, among so many other things. And of course, you just listened to the president. Where do all these issues leave us, given the impact of COVID-19 and in consideration of the fact that the revised budget has been signed? Well, we have a couple of gentlemen who will be joining us, but let's begin with Ogbonna Okuku, who is a business and investment consultant. He joins us from our studio in Abuja. Thanks for joining us this morning. The issues are there. There's a plethora of issues, definitely giving so many people concern. How concerned are you about the economy in the light of COVID-19?
Everybody will be concerned. Every watchers of the economy and the managers of the economy must be concerned at this time, because COVID has affected almost everything, whether it's the economy, whether it's the transport system, whether it's construction work, whether it's the agri sector. Every sector have had a hit from the COVID-19 and its effects. But I mean, anyhow you want to look at it, the cushions, the things that need to come in to help support some of the businesses are things that we are all looking at. The focus now for the government, and then every other, even the private sector, what are the things that everybody needs to, bring on board to see how we can, grow the economy or get, businesses back on their feet. So pretty much it's a big blow on all the global economy. Nigeria not left out of it. So the blow is also here. We're feeling the impact, and then every single person is feeling the impact.
Also joining us this morning is Obadiah Melafia. He's an economist, and he would also want to lend his voice. Thank you for joining us this morning as well. Well, you have heard Mr. Okuku express his own the fact that everyone would be concerned. Talking a little more specifically now, which area of the economy do you think we must do something about, otherwise we are in serious trouble?
Well, actually, the productive sector, this is really what I think is critical. Human capital is extremely important. Health, social welfare, human development, education, they're all important. But for now, what we really need is to reboot the productive sector. Because, the lockdown has reached a level where for many manufacturers, having virtually slowed down or closed down, restarting would require a lot of work. And particularly in the infrastructure area, because this is really where the concept of public works will be very critical. And that is to be able to get a lot of our young people back to work. And I'm hoping that, our decision makers will have enough wisdom to focus on getting particularly young people back to work using public works approaches to, to infrastructure development, rural development. I know there's been this 774, local government's jobs scheme. And I'm very concerned that there's been bickering over it to and fro between the legislature and the ministries. I think we need to avoid that so that there is a comprehensive approach and a win-win positive sum approach that will get a lot of people back to work. This is critical to restoring confidence, to rebooting aggregate demand, and to get the great Nigerian people back to work and to restore confidence. This is fundamental. We need to get it right so that we can avoid what looks like an unprecedented recession. And listening to Mr. President, I feel encouraged. I think this is a positive step. They've shown enough concern, and what is important is that the marching orders are given so that those at the implementation end will do what they must do. And it cannot be business as usual, because we live in extraordinary times in which it's not only just the numbers, but the social psychology. The people are in a state of shock because of, the virtual paralysis in the economy and in our international system.
Yeah, just one moment. Well, what you have said is quite valid, and many people are definitely concerned, and I just as Mr. Okuku said earlier, but if we are to pay a little more attention to what you have just said now, on the one hand is what the president has said. That is what the government is going to do or is planning to do. And you have also talked about the constraints of the words being matched with action. How quickly do you think we can get to that? I'll bring in the private sector end later, and the impact on the people which you're talking about. But how close are we, or far are we, from what the president said to actions being taken on what the president said?
Well, like I said, I'm just hoping it is not business as usual, because the bureaucracy has been a binding constraint, even in the best of times. So in these extraordinary circumstances in which we live, there could be tendencies for slippages. So I'm just hoping that somehow, the people in charge will be more rigorous in ensuring that all these good policies, and they're good policies, will take off the ground very quickly. And there should be more rigorous monitoring. This is a big responsibility for Ministry of Finance, Planning and Budget, and of course the Office of the Secretary to the government, and also my teacher and mentor, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the Chief of Staff, to really ensure that there's a rigorous monitoring and enforcement of implementation, and to get all the people involved to understand that it cannot be business as usual, and that we need to move with speed to get things done, particularly in the capital allocation, where Mr. President has shown very strong commitment. And I think this is wisdom, that by end of this month, at least they will get at least 50% of their capital expenditure. This is really a record. We haven't ever attained that level in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years, in fact. So I think these are positive developments.
Okay.
We need to build on that to restore confidence among our people.
Let me take this to Mr. Okuku now. You've heard Dr. Melafia, and the natural concern anyone would have is, he talked about speed, about the government acting expeditiously to jumpstart the economy. Are you hopeful with that speed?
Beyond being hopeful, I also expect, certain, actions to follow, what the president has just said. Now, there has to be, strict monitoring, of some of these projects. Everybody concerned must be serious about paying attention to details. We all know that we're in very serious and very serious times. So that means there'll be no room for lapses. There shouldn't be rooms for excuses. Then again, those within the bureaucracy must be given targets. Each and every one of them, no matter the agency where you operate from, everybody must have a target, and there has to be an audit on our workforce, so that quickly, if it's going to be manned from the SGF's office or from the head of service, those in offices must have the right skill and have the ability to deliver on whatever you're going to pass down to them. There's something that exists in the Ministry of Finance called the Efficiency Unit. I think that should go around the entire ministries. If it's Servicom structure that they want to use, but we know that at this point in time, we should not have any excuses at all. Anyone given a job must do that job, and within a specific time, given to them to deliver on that job. So until we begin to place demand on our workforce, we can't be getting, the adequate results that we expect. Don't forget, About, I think there are about 400,000 of them working within our workforce. So our income, our revenue as a nation, or our location as a nation is servicing, that's about less than 2% of the entire nation. So if we're sacrificing so much for the workforce needs to also give us commensurate result from whatever, whatever monies are being pushed into their salaries, gratuities, and pensions, when they have left work. So these are things, I know that those managing the economy should focus on and make sure that they all, happen, so that we can see faster results.
Mr. Okuku, on the one hand are the people who give the instructions, on the other hand are the people who get the job done, and to them money is released. The Auditor General over the years has always indicted one agency of government or another of either not performing or not delivering or not declaring resources that have been given to them, and the Auditor General has continually asked for reports to be made. So far, nothing has been done about that. That report is there to, if you want to say, fight corruption, and that should be like a trace, a pattern through which we can judge which agency has been up to par and which agency hasn't been up to par over the years. These agencies are needed to do their job so that the private sector can do their own jobs as and when due. Given these challenges with these agencies and the efficiency, unit that you have advocated for that should go all over the place, how effectively do you think we can do that to jumpstart the economy in record time? Because, as you said, we really don't have time.
I'm very confident because, the kind of leadership we have in Nigeria today, for me, we've always had, issues with leadership. But the kind of leadership we have in Nigeria today speaks to the fact that anytime Mr. President says something, he means it, and then he gives marching orders to his subordinates to make sure that they begin to implement. So I'm very confident that everybody knows that, yes, on one hand, we need these things to work, and then on the other hand, the president have given instructions, and these things must be implemented. So I'm confident. So all I want is that additional push, because if we don't have feedback system, if you don't give targets, these people just work as if the time is not moving. So if you give them targets, they have deliverables, you will see results, whether they like it or not. And when it begins to affect their income.
Just one moment, Mr. Okuku. Are you saying that they have never been given targets that they should meet in order to be able to work well for the country? Are you saying they never had targets?
See, when we're talking about targets here, what I'm trying to explain here is, if you give someone a target and then there are resultant effects to not delivering on your targets, that's what I'm saying. Because the civil service structure, the way it's structured, you can't really penalize unless the Civil Service Commission comes into the entire plan. So you have to carry the Civil Service Commission along. You carry the head of service along, so that anytime there's going to be sanctions on any officer who refuses to deliver, it becomes, it will propel that efficiency that you're looking for. Because if they have nothing to lose, they really can't do much as far as every human being is concerned.
Well, we're going to take this up when we return from this commercial break that we're about to take, because you've touched on a very, very sore point there, and that is the civil service, which is the engine of any government. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. We're still talking about the Nigerian economy in the light of COVID-19, as you can see. And we still have Dr. Obadiah Mailafia with us. He's an economist. Thanks for staying with us. You broached something the other time about economy and social progress, but we'll come to that one because it's come to somebody else's attention on Twitter, on our Twitter handle. But you also heard Mr. Okuku say the other time that there is a need to tinker with the engine of government, which is the civil service, give them targets and all of that to get things done. What's your take on that? How effective do you think that will be in the scheme of things?
No, I think that's extremely important, and it's really one of the missing gaps in our public policy process. I recall that former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was in Nigeria in 2015, shortly after this administration came into power. And he had discussions with them. I was privileged to have dinner with him and his wife, Sherry Blair. And we had extensive discussions on, the idea of a presidential sort of advisory policy group like he had. He called it, the Prime Minister's delivery unit. We need that sort of delivery unit. He tried to sell that intellectual idea, but I didn't think it went very far. What Tony Blair found out that during his first term in office, his first 5 years, things were not moving well. There were no targets for anybody. Nobody was monitoring anything. And so, things really didn't work well. So he was thinking of a legacy. Was anxious to leave a legacy and to be seen to have performed during his time in office. So he set up the Prime Minister's delivery unit in the Prime Minister's office. And it was a very professional group run by professional policy analysts. All ministers and agencies and departments of governments were given quantifiable targets, not just verbosity, but quantifiable targets. And they were not there as an inquisition. They were there actually to help. If any ministry or department had problems meeting their targets, they will sit together and iron out and find out how to support them and help in driving the agenda. And every month, they had to give a comprehensive report to the Prime Minister. And if still, in trying to help, the department did not succeed, then the minister or whoever was in charge was really fired from their job. So, and it has worked tremendously during Tony Blair's time. And in fact, he's gone all over the world to preach that, idea of delivery. I think the core word there is delivery. And it should be quantifiable and measurable and with clear and unambiguous targets. If we can do that, things will work. It will not be sufficient to just go and hide that delivery unit in one department, let's say in planning and budget or something like that. Ministers will read it and say, well, why should I care? They just drop it. But if they're in the presidency with clear targets and Mr. President gets monthly report as well as quarterly report and annual report on the core programs of the administration with rigorous follow-up. And we need a team that will not just become another auditing group that will be going about collecting money from heads of agencies.
Just a quick one, Dr. Olafia. Just a quick one. You said something that's very, very interesting the other time, and that's that unit in the Prime Minister's office in the UK would recommend that the minister be fired if the person, wasn't performing up to par. Let's hypothesize that we do that. Do you see it happening that the minister will be fired for non-performance?
Well, I didn't quite say that, it is the power of that delivery unit to fire a minister. They will simply present the facts to Mr. President that, these targets are way behind and we are slipping on that. And, at that highest level, whoever is the minister, whatever, will have a real dialogue with Mr. President. And failing which, he might, of course, he reserves the final say as to who can be in and who is out. The whole thing is that it makes for more rigorous implementation. It makes everybody sit up. And it makes everybody in every MDA, every ministry, department, and agency of government to sit up to their responsibilities. But it's got to be measurable. Where you can't measure, you can't know whether you're performing or not. So it is a discipline that I think we need to acquire in the public service.
Well, Mr. Okuku, just one more. Let me take this to Mr. Okuku. Well, when he began the talk, Dr. Melafia recommended that the most urgent sector we need to pay attention to is the productive sector. Do you agree with him? If you do, how do you suggest we go about it? We do not have a dearth of policies. It's that implementation that's always been the challenge.
Now, okay, let me put it in a larger, larger spectrum. Now, what are the driving forces that you need to move or industrialize your economy? First things first, you must have a well-structured workforce that is trained, so you have to have your manpower trained. Number two, you have to have your technology, your sector-specific technology structure that is achievable. The ones that you don't have within you, you can import. Now, you have to have your raw material supply strategy, which means there are things that you will need to support the industries within that system that will make it work. Then your project development, and then financial engineering structure, which is exactly what the central bank and other development finance institutions and the commercial banks are trying to push out so that transactions can begin to move. Then the last thing would be access to market. Now, all these things can only work when you have, because they're all laced with a denominator, which I call efficiency. Now, if you cannot train, or retrain your workforce, it will be difficult for anybody to do business, because some of them don't even have knowledge of what you want to do. Then if your technology transfer model is not well defined to be sector specific, you will just be running around, and then you will not be able to have targeted technology transfer or develop your own technology hub within your own environment. Then the raw material supply strategy, this is very key here, because as we're industrializing, don't also forget that we're still spending a lot of money importing raw material. I'll give you a very simple example. Every ethanol used in Nigeria is still being imported into this country. It's even as bad as I tell people that Tom or candy is only assembled in Nigeria, not produced in Nigeria. I explain. Because if glucose syrup, the three things that you need to produce a candy is glucose syrup, which is about 80%, flavoring, and then the flavoring, and then the next one is the packaging. If all those things are still gotten from either Brazil or Turkey, you haven't started producing those things here. Glucose syrup comes from cassava. It comes from yam. So our attention to setting that raw material supply strategy would help us in our agri sector, because some of these things come from your input in your agri sector. Okay, let's use cassava for example. Nigeria, we are the largest producer of cassava in the world, but we earn about $2 million from cassava exports. Guess what? The second country is Thailand. They produce about 36 million tons of cassava every year, but they actually earn about $2 billion from the same cassava. What is it that they are doing in Thailand? They are only adding value to the cassava that they have. So these are the things we have to also focus on, talking about the productive sector, because everything must work together to make sure that we are in line with coming out of poverty, because everything must be touched. Because looking at your transport sector, the infrastructure that has to help you move your goods from one point to another, which has to get to the market. So pretty much, I believe there's a lot going on in the country today, because the focus of the government on building, sound infrastructure would also help with central bank, what they are presently doing, trying to support, the agri sector. I was having a conversation some few days ago. I said, do you know that if the president did not insist that we should produce what we eat, during this COVID lockdown, How were we going to be waiting for China to open their borders or Thailand to send rice to us? No. But thank God today we are beginning to produce what we eat. So that's the first step. The second step will now be adding value to the things that we are producing, so that we will now begin to export and then give other countries and earn some income for our nation.
Which also now raises the question of funding, because it's interesting, gentlemen, that both of you haven't really talked about, funding in all of the conversations that you have postulated, all of the ideas that you have brought forward. There is the funding challenge for the budget, and there also is the funding challenge for the private sector. Well, the newspapers are rife this morning with reports that the federal government and states are borrowing more and crowding out the private sector. How should the private sector be approaching this? Because the public sector, the government, can only postulate ideas and policies. They need the partnership of the private sector. How easy is it for the private sector at this time to champion some of these things and ensure that the COVID-19 impact on the economy is not too serious?
I think first things first, there has to be some, deliberate effort towards expanding the economy. Something spoke some few weeks ago. When the federal government had, the bonds, it was oversubscribed by 300%. What does that tell you? It speaks to the fact that the economy is small. It's not as large as, we will expect it. So that means there are a lot of free funds waiting for where to go into, secured areas to go into, which also brings me to the most critical issue, which is financial inequality, which exists within this country, which we have to take deliberate steps as policy managers to make sure that we take from the rich and give and create a middle class. So there are strategic ways you can get these things done. I know time will not allow us to, begin to reel out some of these ideas on how these things can work. Apart from taxations, there are things that you can do to make sure that people don't have funds seated in banks. You don't have your, there's some kind of monies that you shouldn't have in the bank. Monies are designed to work. So they do work for you, generate more money, and then, also help other people who are within that space. So until there are those deliberate efforts towards, unifying, our economic structure, it will be very difficult. I know, there are certain things the government have been doing towards trying to help, stabilize the economy. We've never had an economy until this time. I always say that because, you can't have the very rich and then have the very poor, and there's no middle class.
I wonder how many people will agree with you that we never had an economy until now. But let me take that to Dr. Mailafia. You also heard him say, until now, we didn't have an economy. I don't know what he meant by that, but you may want to take that on, along with the fact that there is a need to partner with the private sector. How do we do that? Because you also referenced the other time that if we do not do some things right, we may be heading towards a recession.
Well, actually, let me confess that, this particular technology didn't even allow me to hear anything Mr. Ogbonna Okuku said. I haven't heard him whatsoever. But from the way his mouth was moving, I concluded he must be saying something intelligent and reasonable.
One of the things that he said, let me, if I can just bring you, one of the things that he said is that we need to create, we need to balance out financial inequality, because there are some people, according to him, there are some money sitting in banks that are not doing anything. Meanwhile, money is designed to work. And then he also talked about the fact that until now, we didn't have an economy, among so many other things. So,
well, I'm an economist, so I'm not sure I understand what he means by that. The economy has always been there, even before Nigeria was created in 1914. There's been an economy. The issue is what sort of economy, what level of performance, that is the issue. But on the private sector, I think we're missing a fundamental point. And that is that in a dynamic and growing economy, the private sector should remain the driver and locomotive of economic transformation and collective prosperity. But if you look at the financials, we are actually far from being where we ought to be. And that has to do a lot with monetary policy. You'll be shocked to know that as we speak today, a lot of banks don't want deposits because the CRR has been increased so high that more than 40% of whatever liquid cash they have is stored and kept in the central bank. I think that's a disaster. God help you the day bankers don't want your money. It's a very bad sign because, you know, the intuitive evidence is that, of course, bankers should always be actively looking for depositors' funds. That is how, you know, they can build a pool of funds that they can lend to those who need the money to build their businesses. And the MPR, the monetary policy rate, remains way too high. And it seems to me that we are over-obsessed with maintaining the exchange rate. So we are pouring in so much money just to keep the exchange rate, which in my mind just caters for the needs of the urban elite while neglecting rural agriculture. I'm a farm boy from a small missionary village, and so agriculture is very close to my heart, and I think that we're doing a great disservice by keeping those financial aggregates the way we are keeping them. It is very disastrous for the economy, and there's also the crowding out effect. Trillions of intervention funds have been structured by the CBN, and the CBN is literally taking over the role of being the lender. Of course, it is the lender of last resort, but it should leave the basic operational activities of lending to the commercial banks. And I would really advocate that a lot of the intervention funds should be channeled mostly through the commercial banks. And talk to anybody in the streets, and a lot of people have approached me, please, how do I, access these intervention funds? There's a situation where the people involved become gatekeepers and rent collectors before you even sign a form and they're asking for 10,000 and things like that. I think it is disgraceful. I think it is wrong. We must create a vibrant environment in which business can thrive and flourish.
Okay.
Because
let me. That's a very, very fine, point that you have just mentioned now, because it also reminds me of the fact that there is the formal sector in the private sector, and there is the informal, sector, which some people call the unorganized or artisanal businessmen. Let me take this to Mr. Okuku, to give us his final comments on that. So the informal sector remains the largest, in the entire spectrum of the Nigerian economy, federal or state. What do we need to do to jumpstart that sector so that they can also hold their ace, in the scheme of things?
See, you can't grow an economy in isolation, really, because whether we like it or not, the informal sector, first of all, you have to have a database. You have to even know who they are, because yes, they exist, but I mean, there has to be, a database. Then you now do your proper indexing. Know those who need, to acquire more knowledge. Essentially,
I'm sorry.
Begin to plan for each and every one of them.
Pardon me, Mr.
Okuku, with their concerns.
We could go on and on, but I've completely lost track of time. But I really have to thank you. I believe we'll have to do this again if we're going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. It must be an ongoing conversation. But I have to thank you very much for being a part of this conversation this morning. Ogbonna Okuku is a business and investment consultant. We've also spoken with Dr. Obadiah Mailafia, who is an economist. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning. So we're back in a moment to take on your contribution to the program. Please stay with us. time to take some of your own comments on the conversations that we've had today. Malkwe, you want to go first?
Yes, thank you, Ayo. We have a number of them here. Fair on me or more, I think that's what I'm saying here. I was talking about the NDDC issue. The NDDC issue should be brought out in the morning. Please bring Kolawole and Joy for the interview, and Akpabio with Dr. Karu himself, with the Accountant General, to give the record about the money that was passed to Dr. Karu, which was meant for the postgraduate student. So that NDDC issue is not going away anytime soon, I can tell you that.
And it seems that actually sounds like the jury handing out a subpoena. Professor Inakana says there are visa waivers to medical doctors who are willing to jumpstart their careers in the UK. The Nigerian government must do the needful to make sure that our medical personnel are properly paid and given adequate allowances and tools to function in the midst of this pandemic.
And Olalawal, MD, says, until we begin to build intelligence institutions and systems devoid of political influence and interference, it will be difficult to prosecute and try corruption cases effectively. Indeed, we have a long way to go.
Bagana says, the EFCC Act is to be amended. Then it has, if the EFCC Act is to be amended, then it has to be done carefully with the executive watching, because the National Assembly will want to reduce the powers of the Commission. That's one way to look at it.
And Ida Peterside says, Margot's case is a sign of the moral pandemic in our country. Morally, we've lost it as a country. And look at the Akpabio saga. We need to make adjustments and deal with greed. Well, I know we also have a number of mails, but I don't see that popping up here just yet.
Well, I guess it's something that we have to keep our eyes on and hopefully bring to you at some other times. Well, that's the show today. Thank you so much for watching, and please do keep safe. Take responsibility. It's your life. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for watching. Be responsible out there. I'm Malkwe Yusuf.